song. I will praise your name. I will praise your name. When times of need carry on, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Though darkness falls all around, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. If I forget what I found, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider. You're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I love you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my soul. I will praise your name. I will praise your name. If I feel lost and alone, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Though I may labor in vain, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Through all the heartache and pain, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider. You're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I love you, Lord. I'll honor. I will trust you, Lord. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship everything I say. I love you, Lord. I'll honor you. I'll trust, never let me go. I'll worship, never let me down. I'll love, forever I will love you. I'll love, I'll trust every hour, every day. I'll worship, that's why I worship you. I'll praise you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my song. I will praise your name. I will praise your name.
Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to another live stream with DCCI Ministries. And tonight we do have the privilege of having Robert Spencer with us again to look at the different sects in Islam. Apparently Islam is so perfect, yet there are many different groups who hate one another. We want to kind of dig into it to make sense of it. I'm hearing echo. Is that from my side? Don't know. Peace of Christ be with you, brother. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
By God's grace, I'm good. Thank you.
I was a little distracted by the echo. I didn't know if you were testing that or not. Anyway.
Okay. It's gone now. It's gone now.
Very good.
So, someone picked up. I just put one of your video to David Wood's old channel. Jihad this week, poet or possess. I'm just editing your poets and then I'm putting them up there. They are 30 seconds to 2 minutes. We hopefully we will figure out if the author of the Quran is a poet or possessed or prophet. So some people are asking that 1 minute video is from last 4 weeks of poems of Robert Spencer from Jihad Watch. So I'm just putting them there for people who love poem. That will give also different introduction for Robert Spencer instead of like being hated and identified as Islamophobe. He's got some like other skills as well.
Well, all right. In any case, I don't know what to say about the poetry, but
they are very good.
Yes, that I can tell you about.
They are very, very good. I'm gonna ask you a personal question, but I'm afraid of the answer. So I'll bring up the question. Hopefully, answer is no. Have you written new books since we spoke last?
Well, since we spoke last week, wasn't it?
2 weeks ago, yeah.
2 weeks ago. No, I have not written a new book in the last 2 weeks. I do have a new book out, but it's not about any of these issues. And I have another book that's finished that will be out in November. I wish it wouldn't take that long, but I have no control over that. That's the publisher's decision. And that will be out. That's about a history of the Byzantine Empire. So that also, well, that's a little bit more related to Islam than my current book, because, of course, the Byzantines were fighting off the jihadis for 800 years.
Yeah. So that's going to be ready in October?
November 21st.
November. Okay. I'm guessing you put lots of things about Ottomans in that book?
Yes, it's not actually strictly speaking about them, obviously. It's about the empire that they defeated and supplanted. But there's a great deal about the Ottomans also in my book from 2018, The History of Jihad. And so also I wanted to take care not to repeat all that, but it's impossible to write about the Byzantine Empire without writing, unfortunately, a great deal about the Ottomans. And so they are very much a presence in it, especially as it gets toward the end.
Well, I can't wait for it to come out so we can read it and use it. So thank you very much for all your contribution to the body of Christ on that.
Thank you.
And today I wanted to talk a little bit about, not talk, but actually hear from you and learn from you a little bit about Islam. How many different versions of Islam is out there? I am hearing there are many different versions, but also I am hearing from Dawa gangs there is only one Islam. It just doesn't make that much sense to me. I thought you might kind of come in and enlighten us a little bit.
Well, those who say there's only one Islam, what they really mean is that their Islam is true and all the others are false. So they don't count the other ones. But there are hadiths in which Muhammad says that there will be 72 sects, I believe it is, and 71 will be wrong. And there'll be only one true version of Islam. But he doesn't actually say exactly how to find that. And that's why the sects continue, and even though they're not acknowledged in Islamic theology, and they all hate each other and consider each other to be heretics and apostates, consequently, they kill each other quite frequently. But the divisions never heal because they never can get beyond the idea that these are simply heretics and apostates who have to repent and rejoin the true fold.
So can I just take you a little bit back to time of Muhammad so that I kind of put them in the chronological order? Even though Muhammad said there will be 72 sects and only one of them is true, in his time there was only kind of one version of Islam, and then suddenly from his death we end up having many different versions? How did they came about?
Well, all this is murky, of course, because Muhammad himself is fictional. But if we take the canonical account as true, then yes, there was one community of Muslims during the time of Muhammad, although there is an incident in which he discovered that there was a mosque that was not under his authority and went and burnt it down. So he made sure there was only one sect of Islam at in his time. But the primary division among Muslims comes at the time of, during his lifetime. Actually, the seeds of it were planted, and then those seeds come to fruition after his death, according to the canonical accounts. He of course had the child bride, and it is all because of his child bride Aisha that there is the Sunni Shiite division today.
So why would child involve dividing Islam? So how did that happen? Like,
you know the story about the famous incident in which Aisha, the child bride, at about age 11 or 12, was accused of adultery.
Yeah, they left her behind.
Exactly. The Muslims went on a caravan. They left. They stopped, and she went over the hill, and then the caravan left because she was in a howdah, is it called? It's one of those things you put on the back of a camel, and she's veiled, and they couldn't speak to her, so they didn't realize she wasn't in it. So they picked it back up, put it back on the back of the camel, and left. And then she comes back over the hill, and they're gone, and she's alone. So then comes the young, handsome Muslim warrior who was late, and he sees her in the desert and carries her back to the caravan. And of course, since they were alone, obviously they committed adultery, because any man and woman who are alone will always commit adultery. That's taken for granted in Islam. And so because of this, she was about to be stoned to death. And Muhammad, who was quite fond of her, was very upset. And that's where the division begins. Because Ali ibn Abi Talib, one of his earliest followers, one of his most fervent followers, said to Muhammad, "What are you so upset about? You can just get another woman." Aisha heard him say that. She never forgave him. And so when Muhammad died, the followers of Ali said Muhammad appointed Ali his successor. But there was always resistance, and that resistance was to a great degree led by Aisha, because she hated Ali, because he said he should just let her go and be stoned to death and get another woman. So Abu Bakr is chosen instead of Ali. Abu Bakr dies. Umar is chosen instead of Ali. Umar dies. Uthman is chosen instead of Ali. Ali is chosen after Uthman dies. And then Aisha goes to Muawiyah and gets him to lead a rebellion against Ali. She would never accept that he was the caliph. And so they fought in the Battle of the Camel in 658. And Ali won and magnanimously did not have her killed, because she was, after all, a wife of Muhammad, the mother of the believers, and as she was called, and so on. And so he didn't have her killed. And so she continued to scheme against him.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Certainly.
So you are telling me, according to Islamic tradition, Aisha, mother of the believers, are fighting against the Caliph of Islam, who is also the son-in-law of Muhammad. Is that correct?
That's right.
So two Muslim groups are fighting with one another, and there are lots of bloody bloods around there.
Yeah, this is the fitna war, the first fitna, the disturbance in the Islamic community. There were the wars of apostasy, the Ridda wars in the 630s, when Muhammad died, and a lot of the Muslims said, "Oh, Muhammad's dead, then Islam is over, we're not Muslims anymore." And Abu Bakr went to war to bring them back forcibly into the fold of Islam. Then after that, there was the fitna, which was essentially the civil war in the 650s between the followers of Ali, the Shiite Ali, the party of Ali, and the followers of Aisha. And so that is the seeds of the Sunni Shiite division. The followers of Aisha are the ones who became the Sunnis, and the Shiite Ali are obviously the Shia. The split came when Muawiyah supplanted Ali. Ali was assassinated, as were several of the other rightly guided caliphs. The Khalifa Rashidun, the first four caliphs of Islam after Muhammad. Then Muawiyah becomes the caliph. He's the first non-rightly guided caliph. He's not rightly guided. He's wrongly guided, apparently. And Muawiyah continues as caliph, but there is a group that considers that he's illegitimate and that Ali's son Hussein is the real caliph. In 680, Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, fights Hussein in the Battle of Karbala and defeats him, and the Sunni Shiite split is solidified. After that, the Shiites went their own way, and they had their imams, who were the leaders of the community. There were 12 imams up to the year 874, when the 12th imam, who was 5 years old at the time, disappeared. Probably the Sunnis killed him, but they say that he was spirited away by Allah. He will come back at the end of the world and kill all the Sunnis, and Shiite Islam will triumph. Meanwhile, Shiite Islam is about 90% of the Muslims worldwide, and it's the lineage of the caliphs who were supported by Aisha. And then, of course, after the abolition of the caliphate, then the Sunni states continue in that tradition.
So we've got kind of people who side with Muhammad's child bride Aisha, today identified as Sunnis. People who sided with Muhammad's son-in-law Ali, they are identified as Shias. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. There was always a group. Every time there was a caliph who died, there was always a group, the party of Ali, that wanted Ali to take over. But he kept being passed over because of Aisha, because Aisha would make sure he would be passed over.
So when you say when the caliphs died, Abu Bakr died, like he just died. Umar and Uthman, were they killed or they just got ill and died?
I believe
was that their death was peaceful or out of violence?
No, they were murdered, and they were murdered by supporters of other groups within the Islamic community. And so 3 of the 4 rightly guided caliphs met violent deaths.
So I just find it difficult to understand why would, if Muhammad is the best example to humanity, and if he's the kind of, according to tradition, is the source of Islam, why would members of his household would hate one another so much in the point of murdering one another, as well as murdering its followers?
That's an excellent question. And it goes to the heart of what Islam really is all about, that it is a religion of hatred and violence and war at its heart. And that's why the people who are considered to be the closest to the Prophet, just like if you're closest to a fire in a fireplace, you're going to be the warmest in the room. They are the most violent and intemperate people of all. And they're filled with hatred because this is what he taught.
Yeah.
And so even now, even today, there are numerous examples of how much the Sunni and the Shia hate each other. And there's a very funny clip. I expect you've seen it. A video clip at MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, of a cooking show, a Shiite cooking show, and the Sunnis keep calling in. No, I'm sorry. It's a Sunni cooking show, and the Shia keep calling in and making fun of Sunni Islam. And the cook who's got the show is saying, by Allah, if Saddam Hussein were still alive, he would deal with all of you. And now I will go back to my recipe. And it's ludicrous. But what they say is very illuminating. the prank callers, because they say things like, why don't you mix in the breast milk of Aisha into the recipe? And they are mocking Aisha because they hate Aisha, even though she is the mother of the believers, the Mu'minin. She is the wife of the favorite wife of Muhammad. Because they're Shia, they hate her, and they think that she is the enemy of Islam, essentially.
You are giving me ideas to make a cooking Shias and Sunnis recipe. Can we find, beloved? Can we find that video? Yeah, we get the video and then we make some stuff on it.
Oh, it's an excellent video. I can send it to you after. It's easy to find.
Thank you. So, Muhammad's family is fighting with one another. Is it today, even though like they very much hate one another? I have seen the kind of peace or pieces they show to one another. Do they have only leadership differences, or they disagree on the biography of Muhammad as well? They disagree on the life of Muhammad.
I don't know that they, offhand, I can't think of them disagreeing on the life of Muhammad, except for the leadership difference, that the Shia insists that Muhammad appointed Ali to be his successor. And those hadiths are in the Sunni hadith collections that are, and they're very clear, Muhammad appointing Ali to be his successor. But the Sunnis, of course, have various explanations that mitigate their force. But it's on the basis of those hadiths that they say that Ali is the rightful successor of Muhammad.
Sunni hadith is different from the Shia hadith. Sunnis and Shias differ regarding the customs of Muhammad, correct?
Yeah, to some degree. For example, the Shia build tombs of the saints and they have prayers there, and the Sunni hadith say, have Muhammad forbidding that. So that is one difference in the practice of Islam that is in their core texts. You won't find Muhammad forbidding that in the Shia hadith. But the Shia hadith and the Sunni hadith are actually very similar in content. They're not similar in form. And I always have a hard time finding the Shia hadith that corresponds to various Sunni hadith. The Sunni hadith are easy to find because they are well indexed in the books, and there are searchable texts online and so on. But the Shia hadith, it's almost all the same material, but organized in a different way.
Well, if Shias are encouraging Sunnis to use Aisha's breast milk, I guess there are more disturbing things in Shia sources which needs our attention.
There are a lot of disturbing things in Shia sources. The Shia are extraordinary. I find them quite fascinating in so many ways. And of course, probably the most prominent Shiite of the last century is the Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, who was, of course, a marja himself, the highest authority in Shiite Islam. And the Imams, he was even called the Imam Khomeini, which is an extraordinary title for him to have had. In Sunni Islam, there are all kinds of imams all over the place. The local prayer leader, the one who leads the prayer in the mosque, is the imam. But in Shiite Islam, the imam is the title of the successor of Muhammad. And he has something of the prophetic spirit of Muhammad. And he is infallible. And so the last imam was the 12th imam, according to 12er Shiism. There's also 7er that fell into the well and died, or he was occulted, he's hidden, and he's coming back at the end of the world and all that. But Khomeini actually took the title. He didn't, I don't know if he took it officially, but he certainly was called this, and he never told people not to call him the Imam Khomeini. And that's as if to say that he has something of Muhammad's prophetic spirit and he's infallible. And he wrote very, very matter-of-factly about bestiality and all manner of absolutely revolting practices, and said they were completely acceptable in Islam, in Shiite Islam.
Yeah. One of them is like well known, like muta marriage is being practiced by Shiites
Yes.
And also today, like we get to see how women are being killed and harmed under the Shia Islam in Iran. That's
Yeah.
happening big part of the world.
Marriage is based on chapter 4, verse 24, I believe it is.
Yeah.
I'm going from memory, so correct me if I'm wrong.
424.
That's it, 424.
Yeah.
Shia say that when it says, when you make, I don't have it in front of me, but it's something like, you say something, you make an agreement with the wife and you carry out the terms of the agreement. And so
Yeah.
that on that basis, the Shias say that's the basis for a temporary marriage, that you can do this. Say we're getting married for an hour or a weekend or whatever. And the Sunnis, of course, have hadith where Muhammad abolishes this. But that's one thing that's not in the Shia hadith. It's considered to be still current.
So Shias believe some of the Sunni hadiths are corrupted. Sunnis believe some of the Shia hadiths are corrupted. Shias believe they are the only true Islam. Sunnis believe they are the only true Islam. And the way they love one another is chopping each other's head off.
Yes. We'll see if they're the only true Islam. Then the others are heretics and apostates who must be killed, because Allah promises they will suffer both in this world and in the next. And so they have to be crucified, or their hands or feet cut off on opposite sides, or the other punishments that are in chapter 5, verse 33 of the Quran. And so they apply that to one another. Usually it's been historically Sunnis persecuting Shia, but that's only because there are more Sunnis. If Shia are ever have the upper hand, then they persecute Sunnis, as in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Okay, so we've got Sunnis and Shias, both of them kind of linked with the family of Muhammad. Mother of the believers are fighting with the Caliph, son-in-law of Muhammad, and they're kind of killing one another, killing lots of people, and then we get to see the fruit of that today. So that's Shia Islam, and I understand that Shia Islam has like different branches in it by itself that are like divisions within that circle.
Twelver Shiism is the official religion of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that's the idea that there were 12 imams after Muhammad, first Ali, and then Hussein, and then the descendants of them up until the little boy in 874 who was occulted. And the idea of Shiite eschatology, the central idea of Shiite eschatology, is that little boy will come back when the Shiite Muslims are persecuted more than they've ever been in history, and he will come back then and reveal himself and save the day and kill the enemies of Islam in conjunction with Jesus, who will, of course, be focusing on destroying the crosses and destroying Christianity. So this is the end time scenario that the Islamic Republic of Iran holds to. And that's very dangerous for the world, because it may be that with their attempts to construct a nuclear weapon, that they won't hesitate to use it, even if there is retaliatory nuclear strike, even if there are retaliatory nuclear strikes against Iran, because even if 10 or 15 million Iranians are killed, they would think, oh, that's great, because then the 12th Imam will come back.
Was it the Shia Islam behind of harming Salman Rushdie?
Yes, it's a fatwa from the Ayatollah Khomeini, and
Okay.
so on that though, you won't find Sunnis saying they disagree. Cat Stevens, the famous singer who became a Muslim, and he got into a great deal of trouble in the 80s, in the late 80s, when he said that he agreed with the fatwa, but Cat Stevens is Sunni.
So then Shia Islam is not that peaceful either.
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
Then there's Sevener Shiites. The Seveners believe there were only 7 imams after Muhammad, and then the 7th was the last, because then it actually breaks off into a number of other smaller sects, a great many. One of them actually is the Ismaili Shia, who are the Aga Khan today. And the Aga Khan is famous because there are 49 imams in Ismaili Shiism of the Aga Khan from Muhammad to today. That's an unbroken line. There are not many unbroken lines in all this. And one of them was very famous as a playboy in the 1940s, married the movie star Rita Hayworth. And that was a very famous situation. But he was so obviously not following Islam, he was made to actually renounce his claim to be the Imam. And one of his relatives took over.
Okay, so now I become a little bit more confused. We've got Islam. Under Islam, we've got Sunni and Shias. Under the Shias, we've got lots of different branches who
Yes.
don't like one another. Sunnis and Shias, they don't like one another either. Under the Sunni Islam, is there only one version of Islam, or there are groups kind of fight and try to hate one another as well?
There are many, many different subgroups within Sunni Islam as well. Most notably, right now, are probably the Wahhabis. And the Wahhabis are a Sunni group. A lot of people think that it's a separate sect, but it isn't. It's just a subgroup of Sunni Islam. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab lived in the 18th century, in the 1700s, and he died in 1793. So he's roughly a contemporary of George Washington. And he was a revivalist. He taught that the Islam of the Ottoman Empire, which was at that time the caliphate of all the Muslims. Which one? Yeah. The Ottoman Empire was apostate and had strayed from the true teachings of Islam. So Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab was able to convince an Arabian chieftain named Ibn Saud to follow him, and they were going to restore the purity of Islam. Ultimately, they fought the Ottomans and took control of Arabia away from the Ottoman Empire. And what they founded is known today as Saudi Arabia, from the Saud family that followed Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Wahhabism is a very virulent and violent sect because it goes back to the basics. It says we're going to throw away all the additions that have come into the religion and only go with what's in the Quran and Sunnah. And so because what's in the Quran and Sunnah is so hateful and violent, the Wahhabis are more hateful and violent. And the Saudis, with their billions from the oil, have exported Wahhabi Islam all over the world now.
So that means our life is more in danger.
Well, sure, yes. The whole idea of Wahhabi Islam is to do what Muhammad would do. And, you know, if he were here today, we would not be having this conversation.
Yeah, probably you will be the one first goes.
Yes.
Okay. We've got also other groups like so you've got Sunni Islam, Shia Islam, who kind of hate one another. There is another group called Ahmadiyyas who are usually playing the victim card. Does it have anything to do with Islam?
The Ahmadiyya are an interesting group. They have a slogan, love for all, hatred for none. And yet every last Ahmadi that I have ever met, and I've met quite a few, are the most unpleasant, rude, nasty, obnoxious people. I cannot believe that these people actually profess to hold to the idea of love for all, hatred for none. Even hardline Sunni Muslims that I have encountered are generally kinder, more friendly people on the surface. I'm not saying that they don't believe in jihad or something like that, or wouldn't kill me if they had the chance. But the Ahmadi are just incredibly nasty people. Maybe there are some that are wonderful. I'm sure there are, but I haven't met them. In any case, the Ahmadiyya is only about 1% to 2% of all Muslims worldwide. And they're a strange sect because they insist they're Muslims, but the Sunni and the Shia insist that they aren't. The Sunni and Shia, although they hate each other, only really fanatical hardline members, hardline Sunnis or Shia would actually say that the other group is not Muslim. Sunnis will generally say, yes, the Shia are Muslims, they're just misguided, and vice versa. But both the Sunnis and Shia agree that the Ahmadis are not Muslims. And in Pakistan, it's illegal for them to call themselves Muslims. It's illegal for them to put Quran on their tombstones, and illegal for them even to read the Quran or be seen with it in public, because they are officially not Muslims. The reason why they're not Muslims is because chapter 33, verse 40 of the Quran says Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. And it's very clear in the context of that verse that what that means is he's the last prophet. There are no prophets after him. But the Ahmadis believe that the Mirza Ghulam Ahmed, who was a 19th century preacher who started their movement, is Al-Masih, is the Messiah, is some kind of an eschatological figure, which makes the Sunnis and Shia say, you see, you have a prophet after Muhammad, you're not really Muslims. Like the Baha'i have a prophet after Muhammad, the Baha'u'llah, and so they're not really Muslims. And so the Ahmadi say they're Muslims, the Sunnis and Shias say they aren't. They persecute them quite violently in Pakistan as well as in Indonesia. But then the Ahmadi spokesmen come to America and they side with the Sunni Muslim Brotherhood and all their oppressors. It's very strange.
You've done extensive studies on Islam. You've written books. You've done lots of engagements. What do you think Islamic definition for someone to identify themselves as a Muslim?
Well, the Islamic identification is if you say Shahada, you're a Muslim.
So other things doesn't matter if you kind of, if you identify imams as perfect, they're infallible. If you identify as another messenger or another prophet came after Muhammad, those things are not meta according to Islamic teachings.
Well, see, it's a little bit of a gray area, because the average Muslim, if you asked him, if we went out onto the street right now and stopped the first 5 Muslims, probably here there wouldn't be 5 Muslims on the street, but I know there would be where you are. And they would, and ask them what makes a Muslim, they would say the Shahada. There's no God but Allah, Muhammad is his prophet, and you're a Muslim. But then if you start asking them, well, if these people believe that Ali was the caliph after Muhammad and the rightly guided caliphs are usurpers, excuse me, usurpers and counterfeits, then they would say, oh, they're not Muslims, or they would say they're misguided. Or if you say, or what if somebody says the Shahada, but he believes Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is the Messiah, then, well, no, he obviously isn't a Muslim, and so on. And so while they make the statement, then they'll end up taking it back in 100 ways, depending on what sect they belong to.
Okay. So you talked about Shia Islam, you talked about Sunni Islam, you talked about Ahmadis, and then you expressed while Ahmadis are being persecuted by Muslims in Pakistan and country like Indonesia, yet they are willing to go to bed with Sunni Muslims in the state and even in the in United Kingdom. So they are quite okay with that. Is it correct that Ahmadiyya Muslims cannot go to Mecca?
Yes, they're not Muslims.
Okay,
so like you and I can't go to Mecca. They can't go to Mecca unless they can feel that they are Ahmadi Muslims and just go on the basis of, I mean, I think it would be probably fairly easy for an Ahmadi Muslim to pass as a Sunni and go to Mecca without any trouble. How many do that, I wouldn't venture to guess.
Okay. And so where does the Sufi Islam steps in? There is another kind of group called Sufi Muslims, and they've got like all about another love and peaceful Islam version until you dig into the history and then see how violent they are. But where do Sufi Islam steps in these different groups of Islam?
Sufi Islam is not actually another sect either, like the Wahhabis. It's a way of practicing Islam that both Sunnis and Shia could do. and consequently, there are many, many people who are both Sunnis and Shia who are influenced to varying degrees by Sufism. There are also some Sufis who will say, at least in my own experience, that they're not Muslims, that they're Sufis but not Muslims, and insist that Sufism is something that can be practiced by anyone. But I see somebody in the comments saying Suf is wool, which is where the word comes from, that they would wrap themselves in these woolen cloaks, and they're woolly thinkers. Yes, that's absolutely true, because a lot of people in the West are fooled by the Sufis. They think that the Sufis are the peaceful, loving, hippy-dippy, everybody is in the group Muslims, and they're an example of how Islam can be peaceful, and that Islam is not only the violence of the Wahhabis and the others, but it's also the peaceful Sufis. The problem is, when you look at the peaceful Sufis, the more you look at them, the less peaceful they become. The Sufis do not renounce the idea of violent jihad. They do spiritualize a great deal of the Quran. When they read the Quran, they tend to see in Sufi exegesis a great deal more that is symbolic. They read a lot of the passages as parables that the Sunni and Shia do not read as parables. They have a mystical side. I mean, that's what they're all about, really, is a mystical union with Allah. And consequently, that's why people think that they're peaceful. But they never reject violent jihad. And this is the deception that is at the heart of what they're doing, because a lot of people in the West are attracted to them, people on spiritual searches and things like that, because they like the mysticism and they don't realize the import of what they're getting into. But the Sufis were a tremendous influence, for example, on Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he prescribed Sufi spiritual exercises for the early brothers. The Muslim brothers were dedicated to waging violent jihad to restore the caliphate after the caliphate was abolished by the secular Turks in 1924. And yet Hassan al-Banna never thought that the Sufi exercises were incompatible with the violence that the Brotherhood was dedicated to pursuing. The Quran and the sword was part of their motto, to restore the caliphate. The Sufis were the leaders of the Chechen jihad against Russia from the 19th century up until the middle of the 20th century, when the Wahhabis flooded into the area and took the whole thing over. But the idea that the Sufis are peaceful is belied by both their theology and history. Even Al-Ghazali, the great philosopher who was the founding figure of the Sufi movement, speaks about killing the philosophers because they're heretics, speaks about waging jihad against those who are fighting against Islam. He's very clear about these things, and the Sufis take what he says very seriously.
We do have very big group of Sufi community in Turkey, and until I looked into Islam, because like before I start engaging with Muslims, in my mind, like they were all peaceful, lovely, just circulating around the music, and then it was all lovely, beautiful, until I figured out like how actually full violence they are. But it's very easy to be deceived by Sufi Muslims today, because they give the image that we are very peaceful. It's all about spiritual fight.
Yes. And they, in the West, in the United States, at least, they take on the attitudes and the appearance of people who are, of the 60s hippies and the people who are supposedly on spiritual searches. So a lot of people think, oh, they're harmless. They're just people with their heads in the clouds looking for God, and that's all. And so they're not taken seriously. But they're no different from the other groups in terms of their theology.
Okay, so we need to watch out for them as well, since they follow the same book.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got Sunnis, we've got Shiites, we've got Ahmadis, we've got Sufis. Is there any other group under the Sunnis? We've got lots of groups. Where does Taliban or Muslim Brotherhood goes under these groups? They are like under the Sunnis.
Yeah, Taliban is a Sunni group, and Taliban comes out of the Deobandi school, which is in India. And the Darul Uloom Deoband is a theological school, very powerful and influential in India, that is similar to but distinct from the Wahhabis. So Deobandi Islam is a hardline kind of Sufism, a hardline kind of Sunnism, like Wahhabi Islam, but it is not another sect. And the Deobandis are the Deobandi perspective is what informs the Taliban's view of what Islam is all about. ISIS, of course, is another Sunni group. All these groups are Sunnis, really. All the jihad groups around the world are Sunnis, with the exception of Hezbollah, which is Shia and is a client, of course, a proxy group of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is Shia.
So, what is the difference between these many different Sunni groups? Like, why can't they just unite it and make it life easy, and then I just come up with like one Sunni version of it?
Well, the problem is the whole idea of the purity of Islam, and the whole idea of declaring other Muslims to be heretics or apostates. So you pronounce takfir against another group of Muslims, and they're not Muslims, then you can't really come to some agreement with them. So take, for example, the Wahhabis and their quarrel with the Ottomans. The quarrel was over the Ottomans not being Islamic enough and not following the theology that they professed to hold and not applying it in a thoroughgoing enough manner. And so the Wahhabis thought that they were lax to the degree that they had to be supplanted. But it isn't as if the Ottomans had a different version of Islam, that they actually disagreed on a theoretical level with the Wahhabis. If you asked any Ottoman cleric, he would have said, well, of course, that's exactly what Islam is all about. And so then why are you warring against the Wahhabis and not just adopting their perspective? Because, of course, the Ottomans didn't want to relinquish power to this other group. And the Ottoman clerics would not have wanted to be supplanted by this group of fanatics coming out of the desert. The differences in Islam, though, negligible.
So recently, we've got this group in Turkey and also very similar group in Syria. They don't identify. We don't identify them Muslim, but they identify themselves as Muslims, called Alevites.
Yes.
Where do they, like, who they are? Where do they fit?
They come out of Shiite Islam.
Okay.
And so do the Alawites, which is a similar name but a distinct group. That is the group that Bashar Assad belongs to in Syria. The Alawites are about 12% of Syria, but they have the political power. And both of these, the Alevi in Turkey and the Alawites in Syria, the Alevi in Turkey and Syria and the Alawites in Syria, they are essentially syncretistic groups that take elements of Islam, elements of Christianity, elements of probably other religions or other religious traditions in that area, and they make a new whole out of it. They're generally very secretive, so that very few people know what the specific theology is of Alawism or Alevism. But if it comes down to needing help from outside, they will go to the Shia. And so you have Assad needing to be supported in continuing to hold power in Syria, he went to Iran because he knew that the Iranians would look favorably upon the Alawites as fellow Shia, even though they're hardly hardline 12 or Shia by any means. And but the 12 or Shia clerics actually gave the Assads a certification of the orthodoxy of the Alawites as legitimate Shiite Muslims, and that was able to prevent them from being overthrown and killed by Sunnis who were rallying support by saying these people aren't even Muslims; they should not be ruling over us.
So, would you kind of think that Alevites and Shiites are going to get together because they want to be against Sunni Islam mainly?
Well, it is a certain enemy of my enemy is my friend situation, but also Alevi and Alawite Islam or Alevi and Alawitism come out of Shiite Islam. Shiite Islam has an extraordinary proliferation of sects. I mentioned before the Seveners. The Seveners they came about because the seventh Imam said, "This son of mine is going to be my successor." But then he died before the Imam died. That's a good idea. Maybe I should. And when he died, some of the followers of this group, they thought, well, the infallible Imam said he was the successor. And so the dead son's children, the grandsons of the Imam who said that he will be his successor, he's the Imam now, the grandson. Whereas others said, well, he died, and so his brother is the new Imam. And so you see there was a split there. And then those groups go off and they split even further. And it gets to be extraordinarily complicated. And you end up with very small groups. But many of these groups still exist. Shiite Islam is an extraordinary proliferation of things. And Alevi and Alawite Islam ultimately come out of it. So there's a certain kinship that they have with the dominant Shiite group, which rules Iran.
Did I forget any other group? You've got Quran-only Muslims. Would you kind of put them in any sects, or you just like ignore them, lost?
Yeah, Quran-only Muslims, I think, are just trying to fool Westerners into complacency, because Islamic apologists in the West are very embarrassed by the Hadith. And that's altogether understandable. The Hadith are very embarrassing. And so Quran-only Muslims try to fool the Christian apologists and other people that they're arguing with by saying, oh, we don't accept any of the Hadith. We accept Quran only. And they think that solves all their problems, as if Quran were a book of peace. But Quran is completely, in the first place, incoherent without the Sunnah, without the Hadith. It doesn't make any sense, because if the Hadith supply the Asbab al-Nuzul for all these Quranic passages, the circumstances of revelation. If you don't have the circumstances of revelation, then you have these clipped, elliptical, opaque statements that nobody's going to be able to make any sense of. And so, in the first place, Quran-only Islam makes no sense. In the second place, it's not a sect that has any following, any significant following among Muslims. It's like the tiny Shiite sects that I was talking about a minute ago. It's only for Western consumption, so as to confuse people who don't know very much about Islam, and maybe they read about Aisha being 6 years old and 9 years old and all that, and they come and say to a Muslim, what do you say to this? And he says, oh, we don't believe any of that. We only believe the Quran. Oh, I see. And it fools people. And so many in the West are so eager to be fooled.
There were some Quran-only Muslims in Turkey. Sadly, they had to run for their life because they're not very much welcomed.
There you go.
I was reminded another group or another sect in Islam, Nation of Islam in America.
Oh, yeah. Well, most of the Muslims in the world would say they're not Muslims. However, the nation says they're Muslims, And Louis Farrakhan, who is the leader of the group, goes to Saudi Arabia, goes all around the Islamic world, collects a lot of money in donations. So when we see the Sunni and Shia saying, oh, they're not really Muslims, that has to be tempered by the fact that it's quite lucrative for the nation to hold the idea that they are Muslims. But the Nation is another fascinating group, really. They were started by a very mysterious figure who appeared in Detroit, if I recall correctly, around 1930. And his name was Farad, W.D. Farad, or Fard. And many people say he was from Pakistan or India. In those days, there was no Pakistan in those days. And he was an umbrella salesman in Detroit. But he said that he was Allah. And he got a following of people who believed this ridiculous mythology that he concocted that said that the black men were the race created by Allah, and that white people were created on the island of Madagascar by an evil doctor, Dr. Yaqub, who was trying to foil the plans of Allah. And so he created this intrinsically evil race with white skin. And all the prophets and Jesus and everybody, they're all black. And so it's this movement of race hatred that calls itself Islamic and takes some ideas from Islam, but mixes them with all this race nonsense and this crazy mythology. W.D. Farad disappeared after a few years, but his principal follower was Elijah Muhammad, who was an American, a black American who converted to the Nation of Islam. And then Louis Farrakhan was a follower of Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm X, of course, is the most famous exponent of this group, although they assassinated him when he became an Orthodox Sunni Muslim. He didn't know he wasn't a Muslim, and he wanted to make the Hajj. So he went to Mecca, and the Saudis wouldn't let him proceed. And they gave him a test to see if he was a Muslim. And he failed because he didn't know about real Islam or Sunni Islam. So they told him, you're not really a Muslim. And he responded by becoming a Muslim, a Sunni Muslim. Whereupon he made the Hajj, returned to America, and started to preach against the Nation and against the racist hatred that the Nation was all about. And that's when they killed him.
Wow, very peaceful. Do you know what kind of questions they asked him regarding if he's Muslim or not?
I believe, yeah, I've seen that. There are some of them in the book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X.
Okay.
It's been many years, though. I believe, it's just who's Muhammad? Is Muhammad the last prophet, and so on, things like that. Because somebody coming out of the Nation without knowing might say that W.D. Farad was the last prophet, and then he's not a Muslim.
Yeah. So we've been live just under an hour, almost an hour, and you have given me many different groups in Islam, and then you kind of unpacked for me how peaceful they are towards one another as well as towards the world. But in your opening statement, you kind of expressed, according to Muhammad, there are 72 sects, only one of them is correct. So you've got all those sects. What do you think, which one is more close to Islamic paradise or in the right path? You've done lots of studies, you've been teaching, so any of them are getting there, or it's all messed up?
I don't think that any group can say for sure that it's the one that's right, because they all have their various cases. I think the Shiites might actually have the best case because of the hadith about Ali being the successor. On the other hand, the Sunnis do have their explanations for that and wave it all away. And then, of course, the whole Sunnah is fabricated. and it was written by people who were trying to justify their own sect. So of course you would find things justifying Shiite Islam and Sunni Islam within it, within the corpus of the Hadith, because that's what it was written for. That's what it was written in order to do. And so you'll find a great deal that justifies both. You'll also find, we haven't mentioned the Khawarij and how they, when Ali and Muawiyah were fighting, the Khawarij said, you're both wrong, and we reject any leader of the Muslims who's a sinner. And so it's a very, very violent purist group that was quite rigorous. But all the Muslims waged war against it. Still, it survives. The Ibadi Islam in Oman is the remnants of the Khawarij, which is kind of ironic, since Ibadi Islam in Oman is quite peaceful, at least on the surface. I'm not saying that it renounces jihad or anything of that kind, but you don't hear about Ibadis going out and carrying out jihad attacks all over the place. And so it's kind of ironic that they are the descendants of the Khawarij.
So there seems to be like lots of group with their own doctrine, with their own practice of Islam. And what would you suggest people like me who doesn't know that much about those different sects, as we engage with Muslims, where should we start? Should we just find all the books linked with these groups and then get the basics, or where will be the best place to start in our evangelism?
Oh, I think you don't need to necessarily know about all the sects to preach the gospel to them. It would be more useful probably to be very, very well versed, as of course you are, with what the Quran says about Jesus, about Christianity, and be able to exploit the fact that the Quran tells people to follow the gospel, tells people that if they're in doubt about what's in the Quran, then they should consult those given the scripture before them. These kinds of things that obviously point to the fact that Christianity is the actual truth as opposed to Islam, testified to even by Islam itself. But of course, it might be in terms of your personal interaction with particular Muslims, it would be useful to know what sect they belong to and what their perspective is. But I don't know that there's anything that is particularly sectarian that would help with evangelism. The main thing about evangelism is to make the case for Christ on the basis of who he is in the Gospels, and show how the Quran points to that even without realizing it.
Yeah. I did ask the question because when we have people like you who's got like amazing knowledge, and then we just sit down and then lots of information, it's just like so overwhelming, and it makes us to think actually we don't know anything and we don't know where to start. So thank you for encouraging us. We just start with Jesus and we finish with Jesus. So that's very helpful. Thank you. I'll ask you my last question. This is going to be personal, since you spoke approximately an hour on different sects in Islam, all these people. If you had to be in a train, okay, without stop for an hour, which group would you feel more comfortable to be with?
I hate to say it, but because what I said before, because, well, anyway, I'd probably be the Ahmadis, because they likely would not kill me. I would probably be able to get out at the end of the ride. Probably.
Okay,
so the Sunnis, the Shia, I don't think I'd make it. But the Ahmadis, they're obnoxious. It would be a deeply unpleasant hour, but I would walk off the train, probably.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I do hope and pray that you won't end up in such a situations. If it comes to that, you've got glorious gospel with you. You can use that time for that. I'm so grateful today you made yourself available and joined us and helped us to think through this topic. So thank you so much for that. And thank you very much.
wonderful to talk to you. Great blessing. Thank you.
And thank you very much, everyone who joined us in the live stream. By God's grace, we will see you on another live stream. Until we see you again, may Christ crucified silence you with his love. God bless you all.